there. Glad we're all here to dive into this whole smart city thing. It's
Yeah.
one of those things where it's like it feels like everyone's talking about it, but it's like drinking from a fire hose, right? There's
Mhm.
just so much out there, so many different angles.
Right.
But you sent over this excerpt from Smart Cities,
Mhm.
the philosophy of urban living and technology.
Yeah.
And it seems like a really good place to like actually get into the deeper questions, right? It's
Right.
not just about like the cool gadgets and the tech, but like
Absolutely.
what does it mean for us, for how we actually live?
Yeah. What kind of future are we building, right?
Totally, totally.
It's easy to get lost in all the hype,
Yeah.
but the real meaty questions here are about values.
Yeah.
Like
Mm.
what kind of urban life we want in a world that's just like more and more shaped by tech.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, okay, like let's start with the basics. When we throw around this term smart city, what are we actually talking about?
Um, like imagine a city that uses technology to actually make life better in a bunch of very, very practical ways.
Okay.
Like, think about like sensors that make traffic flow smoother,
Mm-hmm.
AI that's managing the power grid so there's less waste,
Yeah.
or even just apps that can connect you instantly to public services.
Okay.
So it's like using the Internet of Things,
Yeah.
all that stuff, big data,
Right.
to make the city run better, essentially.
So it's like the city's operating system is getting like a
Yeah.
major upgrade.
Big time.
But then this excerpt like dives right into this term that kind of makes my skin crawl a little bit. Surveillance capitalism. What's that all about?
So it's the idea that in a smart city,
Yeah.
the data becomes a new kind of currency, and we, the citizens, are the product. So
Oh,
every move we make, everything we do, every interaction, tracked, analyzed.
oh,
And it's not just about like knowing where the traffic jams are. It's about predicting how you're going to behave, maybe even influencing it.
okay. Yeah, that's where I get a little freaked out. It
Uh-huh.
reminds me of like that old philosophical idea, the panopticon,
Exactly.
like a prison where you might be watched at any given moment.
Right.
So you change your behavior just in case.
Exactly. And it's not even just cameras anymore.
Right?
Think about like how the algorithms on social media are already like shaping what you even see.
Totally. Yeah.
So what happens when that logic like gets applied to your whole city?
Yeah.
This excerpt calls it instrumentarian power.
Okay.
Basically, the people who control all this data have the power to kind of like subtly nudge us in certain directions.
So wait, so if our data is being used to predict and like maybe even control how we act, does
Yeah.
that mean free will is becoming like an illusion?
That is a big, big philosophical question.
I mean, is that what we're signing up for when we get more efficient traffic lights?
Yeah.
Right.
And the excerpt uses Singapore as an example.
Right.
Yeah. It's supposed to be like this model smart city, right?
Yeah.
Facial recognition everywhere, all in the name of safety and security.
Right.
But the question it brings up is like, how much privacy are we willing to give up for that,
It's funny you mentioned that. I was just reading about how they use that same tech to like track if people are littering or smoking in unauthorized areas.
Oh.
And like, yeah, it's effective, but is that the kind of society we want, where every little thing is
Right.
monitored?
Yeah, it's a slippery slope for sure.
What happened to a little harmless, rule breaking every now and then?
And this excerpt actually argues that this constant monitoring, it creates this culture of self-censorship
Oh, interesting.
where you might actually avoid certain places, even certain conversations, certain thoughts,
Yeah.
if you feel like you're always being watched.
It's like the digital version of Big Brother is watching you.
Exactly.
But okay, so this excerpt isn't just about the creepiness factor, is it?
No, not at all.
I mean, it also talks about how this smart city tech
Right.
could actually make the gap between the haves and have-nots even bigger.
Exactly, the digital divide.
Yeah.
That's already a problem. But imagine a city where like everything depends on you having the newest phone,
Right.
super fast internet.
Right.
What about the people who can't afford all that
Yeah.
or who aren't comfortable with technology?
Right. Right.
The big question.
But couldn't you argue that, like, technology can also help make things more equal
Oh, for sure.
by, like, giving people access to information and services that they maybe couldn't get before?
Absolutely. The potential is there.
Yeah.
But this excerpt is like, it challenges us to think about, okay, but who is actually designing all these systems,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And whose needs are actually being met?
Right.
If we're not careful, you could end up with a city that's like perfectly designed for the wealthy and the tech-savvy,
Right.
and everyone else is left behind.
So it's not just about making a city smart.
Yep.
It has to be smart in a way that helps everyone, right?
Exactly. It has to be equitable. It has to be inclusive.
Yeah.
And they use Barcelona as an example.
Oh, interesting.
They're trying to do things a little differently there.
Okay.
It's all about this idea of digital sovereignty,
Okay.
giving citizens control over their own data,
Right.
and using platforms that are open source that everyone can access.
So I'm noticing a bit of a theme here. It's
Yeah.
like with every cool futuristic piece of technology, there's this shadow side that we we
Yeah.
need to think about.
Absolutely.
But okay, before we get too dystopian here,
Yeah.
let's shift gears for a minute. Talk
Sure.
about something a little more uplifting, the environmental impact of all this.
Right, the whole green aspect.
Yeah, yeah. Are smart cities actually green cities?
That's where things get a little messy.
Yeah.
And the excerpt brings up this term, the green paradox.
Okay. Okay. Green paradox. That sounds kind of ominous. Isn't the whole point of smart cities to be like better with resources?
Yeah, you'd think so, right?
Reduce our environmental impact, all that?
Right, more efficient.
Yeah.
And to be fair, there are some, like, really promising ways that this tech can help with sustainability.
Okay.
Like, think about smart grids that are, like, distributing energy in a more efficient way.
Right.
Sensors that are, like, constantly monitoring air quality.
Okay.
Or even buildings that can, like, automatically adjust how much energy they're using based on how many people are there or what the weather's doing.
Yeah, that all sounds pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So where's the paradox then?
Well, the excerpt kind of points out that, like, we often forget about the environmental cost of making all this fancy technology in the first place.
Oh, right. Okay.
So all those sensors and servers and data centers and all the gadgets, they require a ton of energy and resources to manufacture.
It's like we're so focused on reducing emissions from our cars and buildings that we don't even think about the emissions it took to make the tech that's supposed to help us do that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole issue of e-waste, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What happens to all those discarded smartphones and sensors and, you know, all the devices when they become obsolete?
Yeah, we're already struggling with the global e-waste crisis as it is.
Big time.
It's like this is only going to get worse.
Yeah, and with the rapid pace of, like, you know, tech innovation in smart cities, it could get a lot worse.
So we can't just assume that, like, more technology equals a greener city.
No, not at all.
We need to be, like, way more thoughtful about how we design this stuff.
For sure.
Manufacture it, and then, like, what do we do with it when we're done with it?
Exactly, yeah. It's about thinking about the entire life cycle of these technologies and being mindful of the environmental impact, like, at every stage.
Yeah.
And that's where this idea of a land ethic comes in. The excerpt mentions Aldo Leopold.
Oh, yeah.
Who was this ecologist, you know?
Yeah, I vaguely remember reading about him back in college.
Yeah, he argued that we need to expand our ethical circle
Okay.
to include the natural world.
Did he say something about, like, how we're all part of one big interconnected ecological community?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
He believed that we have a moral responsibility
Okay.
to care for the land and all the creatures on it.
Yeah.
Not just for our own benefit, you know.
Right.
And he called for he called it a land ethic
Okay.
to guide our actions.
So how does that apply to smart cities?
Well, it means that we can't just focus on these, like, technological solutions in isolation.
Right.
We have to ask ourselves, how is this tech impacting the environment?
Yeah.
Even in ways that maybe aren't obvious right away.
Okay.
So are we extracting rare earth minerals in a way that's destroying ecosystems?
Right.
Are we creating more e-waste than we can actually deal with? Are we, like, paving over forests to build more data centers?
Yeah. Okay. So it's like,
It's about the big picture.
yeah, it's not just about the shiny new tech.
No, it's about making sure our progress
Yeah.
doesn't come at the cost of, like, the natural world, you know?
Yeah. Finding that balance between, like, innovation
Well,
and, like, respecting the planet. Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Actually, the excerpt mentions Copenhagen's plan to become carbon neutral.
Yeah.
Are they doing anything to address this green paradox?
They are, yeah. Copenhagen's a great example
Okay.
of a city that's trying to, like, walk that tightrope.
Okay.
So they're using a lot of smart city tech
Right.
to reduce their carbon footprint,
Mm-hmm.
but they're also super aware of the potential,
Yeah.
downsides.
Yeah.
So they're putting a lot of money into renewable energy.
Mm.
They're promoting sustainable transport.
Right.
And they're putting policies in place to reduce e-waste.
So it sounds like they're trying to take like a really holistic approach.
Exactly, not just quick fixes.
Not just the Band-Aid,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another really important point
Okay.
that this excerpt brings up.
Yeah.
Are we designing smart cities for data or for humans?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I have a feeling I know where this is going.
Yeah.
Is this about how we're all like glued to our screens 24/7?
That's part of it, but the excerpt goes like the little deeper than that.
Okay.
It's asking, are we letting data-driven efficiency become like the dominant value
Right.
in how we design cities?
Right.
At the expense of all the other things that make cities, livable, fun, interesting places to be.
Like what?
Well, think about what actually draws people to cities in the
Yeah.
first place, right?
Yeah.
The chance encounters, the street life, the sense of community,
Right.
the feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself.
Right.
Are we designing smart cities that actually encourage those kinds of experiences?
Yeah.
Or are we just making everything super efficient?
Right. Optimized at the cost of all that.
So it's not just about a city that functions well.
Right.
It's about a city that people actually want to live in, right?
Exactly, where they
Yeah.
feel connected to each other, to their surroundings.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the excerpt brings in this, the work of Jane Jacobs,
Oh, yeah.
who wrote this amazing book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities.
Yeah.
She was like all about the importance of street life.
Right.
Mixed use neighborhoods,
Right.
what she called eyes on the street.
Oh, yeah. Eyes on the street. I remember that.
Yeah.
It's like the idea that when people are out and about,
Yeah,
watching over their neighborhoods, it actually makes it safer.
exactly. And creates a sense of community.
And community,
Right.
right. Yeah.
And she argued that the best cities
Yeah.
are the ones that are designed for people, not cars, not data.
Right.
Cities that encourage you to walk, to bike,
Right.
to interact with each other, a mix of spaces. So how do we take all that and then reconcile it with all this smart city technology?
Yeah. Can we have both?
And can we have our cake and eat it too?
And I think the excerpt suggests that the answer isn't to just reject technology altogether,
Okay.
but to use it in a way that actually enhances human well-being
Right.
rather than taking away from it.
Okay.
And there are cities that are experimenting with this,
Yeah.
the excerpt talks about Amsterdam's Smart Citizen Lab,
Okay.
where they're actually getting residents involved
Oh, cool.
in designing and implementing tech solutions
Oh, I love that.
for their own neighborhoods.
It's like a citizen science approach to
Yeah,
smart city stuff.
exactly. Give people the power to use tech
Right.
to improve their communities.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But okay, what about the social side of all this? I mean, we talked earlier about how tech could make inequality worse, but what about just our social lives?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Are we all just going to become isolated individuals?
Right.
Just interacting through our devices,
It's a real concern. And this excerpt actually brings in some really interesting philosophical ideas about this.
Okay.
It mentions Hannah Arendt,
Okay.
who was this political philosopher,
Okay.
who argued that having these shared public spaces
Yeah.
is essential for democracy,
Okay.
for building community.
So it's not just about having parks and plazas.
Right.
It's about having places where people from different backgrounds can
Yeah, come together.
come together, interact, actually build relationships.
Exactly, build those real-world connections.
Yeah.
And she believed that these kinds of encounters,
Yeah.
they're crucial for developing a sense of shared citizenship,
Oh, yeah.
for understanding different perspectives,
Yeah.
and for fostering this sense of collective responsibility.
Right. For the common good, basically.
Exactly.
But in a world where we can order food, work from home, entertain ourselves without ever leaving the house.
Right. Are those public spaces becoming less important?
It's a good question. And I think the excerpt suggests that tech, if we use it right,
Yeah.
can actually help us reimagine those spaces,
Okay.
reinvigorate them,
Sure.
And they use Seoul's Sharing City initiative as an example.
Okay. What's that?
So they're using tech to promote this sharing of resources
Okay.
and to create more opportunities for people to connect.
What kinds of things?
So they have things like shared community gardens,
Oh, cool.
tool libraries, even a platform where you can share skills and knowledge
Oh, wow.
with your neighbors.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's about using tech to make the city more collaborative
Right.
and to foster that sense of belonging.
I like that. It's like using tech to create a more connected
Yeah,
and resilient, like, urban fabric.
exactly.
Speaking of connections, this excerpt highlights some really interesting case studies, right?
Yeah.
We already talked about Singapore, Barcelona,
Mhm.
but what about Songdo, South Korea? Oh, Songdo, yeah.
That one always fascinates me.
It's a really unique case.
Yeah.
It's a purpose-built smart city,
Wow.
designed from the ground up
Okay.
to showcase the latest and greatest technology.
So it's like a real-life Jetsons city.
Yeah, pretty much.
What's not to love?
Well, some critics argue that it feels a little too, like, sterile,
Okay.
manufactured,
Yeah.
it's missing that sense of history,
Right.
that, like, organic evolution that gives older cities their character.
Right. Right.
Like, it's been called a city without a soul.
So it's like the difference between a perfectly manicured garden
Right.
and like a wild, overgrown forest, you know?
Yeah,
Both beautiful in their own way,
absolutely.
but like very different vibes.
Totally.
It seems like finding the right balance is
Exactly.
the key here.
Yeah.
And each of these cities like represents a different approach to that balance.
For sure.
Right. Singapore is all about efficiency and control.
Mm-hmm.
Barcelona's focused on like citizen rights, bottom-up development, and then Songdo's like all about the top-down planning and
Yeah, the tech integration.
check integration. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is all super fascinating, but I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
It's also a little overwhelming. Like,
Exactly.
where do we even go from here?
Yeah.
Are there any like concrete takeaways?
Yeah.
Any guiding principles that we can use to like navigate this whole brave new world of smart cities?
Luckily, the excerpt actually gives us some really good guidance in that final section.
Okay, good.
It boils down to 3 key points.
Okay, hit me with them.
The first, and probably most important, is that we need to make sure there's democratic governance
Okay.
in how smart cities are developed.
Right.
Citizens need to have a say in how technology is being used.
Yeah, that sounds crucial.
Absolutely.
But how do we make sure that those decisions aren't just being made by like
Right.
tech companies and politicians
Close scores. Yep.
behind closed doors? Yeah.
There are some promising examples of like more participatory urban planning popping up.
Okay.
The excerpt talks about Helsinki,
Okay.
where they used a mobile app
Okay.
to get people's input on the design of their city bike system.
Oh, that's cool.
A simple but effective way
Yeah.
to get people involved.
Yeah, I love that. It's about giving people a sense of ownership
Exactly.
over their city.
Right.
Making sure that the tech actually reflects their needs and values.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The second key takeaway is the need for ethical AI frameworks.
Okay.
So as algorithms become more and more important in like managing our cities,
Yeah.
we need to make sure that those algorithms are fair,
Right.
transparent,
Okay.
and accountable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, we don't want to end up with algorithms that are, like, reinforcing existing biases or creating, like, new forms of discrimination.
Right.
You need to make sure that this tech is helping everyone.
Exactly. It has to be equitable.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really interesting philosophically. The excerpt mentions this thing called Kantian deontology,
Oh, boy.
which sounds super complicated,
Yeah.
but it's actually a pretty simple idea.
Okay.
It's basically saying that we need to have rules for AI that are based on like universal moral principles,
Right.
not just on like what's
Yeah.
convenient or what's profitable.
So it's not enough for an algorithm to be efficient. It actually has to be ethical.
Exactly.
Okay, but how do we even, like, begin to define what those ethical principles are
Right.
for something as complex as, like, AI?
That's the challenge. And it's something that like ethicists and computer scientists are really wrestling with right now.
Yeah.
But the excerpt suggests that some like basic principles can be things like transparency,
Okay.
accountability, fairness.
So, like, we need to be able to understand how the algorithms are making decisions,
Right.
hold them accountable for those decisions, and
Totally.
then make sure that they're not discriminating against, like, certain groups of people.
Exactly.
That sounds like a huge task, especially when technology is changing so fast.
It's a big challenge.
Yeah.
But I think it's one we have to take seriously if we actually want to create smart cities that are like truly fair and just.
Yeah, for sure.
And that brings us to the third key takeaway from the excerpt,
Okay.
which is this idea of prioritizing resilience over optimization.
Resilience. I usually hear that word, like, when we're talking about natural disasters or something.
Right.
What does that even mean for a smart city?
So it's the idea that a city needs to be able to adapt to change, right?
Oh.
And withstand shocks,
Okay.
whether those shocks are coming from like climate change or the economy tanking or a pandemic.
Right, or even just like our tech failing, right?
Exactly. Even just like the technology itself breaking down.
Yeah.
It's about building systems that are flexible, that can adapt, that can learn and evolve.
So it's not just about making everything run perfectly when conditions are ideal.
Right.
It's about making sure those systems can still work and work well when
Exactly.
things get messy.
Yeah, when things go wrong.
When things go wrong.
And this idea of resilience really ties back to some of the other things we've been talking about.
Okay.
Like, if we're putting all our faith in these really complex, interconnected systems,
Yeah.
what happens when one part breaks down?
Right. Yeah.
Or what happens when we encounter a problem that our algorithms weren't designed to handle?
Well, right, that they've never seen before.
Exactly. We need to have backup plans.
Yeah.
We need to build in some redundancies, and we need to be able to, like, think on our feet.
It's kind of like the difference between a monoculture and a diverse ecosystem, right?
Oh, I like that.
Like the monoculture might be super efficient at producing one thing,
Right.
but it's also super vulnerable to like disease or pests or whatever.
Exactly.
Whereas a diverse ecosystem is more resilient because it has all those like checks and balances built in.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, and I think it just highlights like the importance of not putting all our eggs in one basket, right?
For sure.
Technologically speaking.
We need to create cities that are, like, robust and diverse,
Yeah.
that can handle whatever gets thrown at them.
You know, as we've been talking, I keep thinking back to that quote from Langdon Winter. Technologies are not merely tools, but forms of life.
Yeah, powerful quote.
It's like this whole conversation isn't just about like the technical details of how smart cities work. It's about how technology is shaping like literally everything.
Right.
Our lives, our communities, our values, all of it.
It really is, and the excerpt ends with this, like, really profound question
Okay.
that I think kind of sums it all up. How can we ensure that technology in our cities serves humanity
Yeah.
and not the other way around?
That's a question we should all be asking.
Absolutely.
It's not just about making cities smart.
Right.
It's about making them smart in a way that helps everyone,
Yeah.
respects our values,
100%.
and that, like, makes us more human, not less.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's a big responsibility, but it's also a really exciting opportunity.
It is. It really is.
Well, this has been amazing. Thanks for, dive in depth with me today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, it's been a real eye-opener.
And to all our listeners out there, I encourage you to, like, keep exploring these ideas.
Yeah.
Read more, talk to your friends and neighbors, get involved in your community.
Yes.
The future of our cities is something we create together, you know?
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And on that note, we'll sign off. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep striving to build a better future, one smart city block at a time.